The fastest way to lose the weight, put on muscle, and adopt healthy habits is to build self-control. It's about saying no to cravings, temptations, and cheap dopamine, and yes to the habits that will lead you to those long-term goals. This concept is pretty simple to understand, and yet if you look around, the vast majority of people are not applying it to their lives. In fact, between 60 to 70% of North Americans are either overweight or obese, stuck in the eternal loop of the New Year's resolution. But if you're watching this, it means that you're making a conscious effort to seek for a solution. Now, most people think that the lack of motivation and the tendency to procrastinate are the main obstacles to their fitness. But the real issue is that they're not in control of their behavior. They're being led by their emotional brain. And in this video, I'm going to talk about how you can reclaim control over your physique and your lifestyle using one simple skill: self-control. Self-control is the ability to control your response to your emotions, desires, and behaviors using willpower. It's the ability to self-restrain when your goals or the situation demands it. And I truly consider this to be a human superpower, and the first ability that you need to acquire if you want to develop your physique sustainably. Now, the reason most people don't achieve their dream physique is because they lack self-control. They can't keep on doing the same simple things over and over again because their impulses get in the way. They can say no to TV and go to the gym. They can say no to ice cream to lose the weight. They can say no to social media to be productive at work. And they can say no to buying impulses when they need to save the money. That's why if you develop this skill, you will be ahead of 90% of people who can reframe themselves daily. You see, life, especially in modern societies, is full of distractions and temptations. They're everywhere. The accessibility to cheap dopamine through social media, food, and video games has never been greater. You're constantly bombarded with ads from companies that are spending millions of dollars to get you addicted to their sugary drinks and idealized bodies. But the truth is that none of this is going to change. And since you can control your environment, the only wise choice is to work on your ability to resist these temptations. Now, when it comes to getting lean, the challenge is to respect your nutrition and calorie deficit, saying basically no to overeating and breaking your streak. And there's nothing complex or intrinsically difficult to understand here. When you understand that you have a constant choice to make, either you go through life unable to control yourself, or you choose to build a skill designed for this very reason. And if you do that, if you build self-control, you essentially become capable of working towards your long-term goals without enduring setbacks and hardships, as practicing self-control leads to self-discipline over time, which is more of a lifestyle practice. But once you start on that path, that's when you unlock consistency, which is the key to fitness. And there's a reason why you see everyone out there talking about how consistency is the key to success, whatever you're trying to reach, and how much you need this skill to achieve the things that you want in your life. Again, that is especially true for fitness. Consistency is what you need to build muscle. Consistency is what you need to lose the weight. Consistency is what you need to adopt fitness as a lifestyle so that you never have to worry about it ever again. This is why my coaching program relies on just that, building the self-discipline that's necessary for you to reach your fitness goals and sustain the change in the long run. You can find more info in the description box. Now, to get you started and to stack the odds in your favor, we're going to go through the step-by-step process on how to build and exercise self-control. You'll know exactly what to do and what to focus on over the next few days. The goal isn't to be perfect and to apply everything at once, because you have to keep in mind that it's a process, and by definition, it cannot be instantaneous. The goal is to maximize your efforts without feeling overwhelmed by the whole process and quitting. Start with the first principle, and when you feel like you've applied it and it's anchored into your daily life, then you can move on to the next one. Don't rush it too much, or the whole system will be too fragile. But don't just read through the lines and not apply any of these concepts either. You have to find your balance and you'll be fine. That out of the way, here are the 4 keys to building self-control. And the first one is to know your weaknesses. You cannot work toward your goals if you don't first understand the obstacles that have preventing you from reaching them in the past. Now, everyone has their own triggers for impulses, cravings, and temptations, depending on your past experiences, your genetic, and your preferences. The goal is to identify the things that will trigger your need for self-control. You have to be aware of the enemy and be able to see clearly where the struggle is going to be in order to prepare for it. For instance, many of my clients, they struggle with sugar because they have a sweet tooth and find it very hard to refrain from, I don't know, chocolate, ice cream, soft drinks, and other sugary treats. But maybe for you, it's not sugar. Maybe it's savory food or carbs, or maybe it's not even about food, but the major problem is the overuse of social media. If the nature of the trigger varies, the toxic relationships remains the same. And in any case, the response that we want to condition is to say no to it whenever it's not serving your purpose. And you need to start by observing and analyzing your behavior to understand what trigger leads to what unhealthy habits. Now, when it comes to fitness, most people are aware of the things that they should do. They know that they should go to the gym. They know that they should not snack if they want to lose the weight. They know that it shouldn't be procrastinating on the couch, watching Netflix, or using social media instead of doing cardio. Most people can identify negative triggers, but don't do it consciously because it provokes a reality check, a sort of confrontation. This is exactly what you're looking for. You want to hold yourself accountable for your health and your fitness. Analyzing with scrutiny the habits preventing you from being in shape, and ask yourself why you're still engaging in them. Shame and guilt, even if painful, will lead you to understand what's hidden behind it. If you follow these emotions, you'll find what you're looking for. But you have to be honest and completely open to talk about it with yourself. The goal isn't to punish yourself for not doing what's right, but rather to locate the problem. And the second thing is to avoid what can be avoided. Once you know your personal triggers, you have the edge because you know what you're fighting against. The next step is to reduce unnecessary exposure to these triggers. If you can minimize contact with some triggers, you should do it, as this will save you a lot of willpower. Some triggers are easier than others, but you can certainly reduce your exposure to it. It can be as simple as avoiding the pastry section when you're going to the grocery store. More than that, this will help you bring the trigger to consciousness and give it nowhere to hide in your brain. You have to make it easier for yourself so you're not constantly battling against the same triggers over and over again. There's a non-negotiable here though, and that is the fact that your home needs to be a secure place, a trigger-free place. For example, if you want to quit drinking alcohol to get in shape, and the problem seems to be that your 65 inches 4K TV that's currently robbing you of 4 hours per day, in addition to telling you that you should grab a beer, then getting rid of the TV and the beer in the fridge will make the process way easier, as you'll limit the exposure in your own house. Because if you want to make this work, you need to stack the odds in your favor and lower the usage of self-control, as this will only make things easier. Because the truth is that ego depletion is inevitable. Regarding self-control, you need to know two things. First is the fact that everyone can exert self-control. It's a skill, not a trait. And if you like self-control, it just means that you need to get more training. Second, in order to exercise this skill, you will need to use willpower. Now, everyone has a limited reserve of it. Knowing this, we need to talk about the inevitable, ego depletion. For most people, this is where they stop caring about their goals and ruin their efforts. Ego depletion is the reason why most people never achieve their dream physiques. It occurs when the reserve of willpower, aka the mental energy that you use in order to exercise self-control, runs low. For example, your job, especially if you work with other people that you tend to not really like, is likely high demanding in terms of self-control. While society in general is highly demanding because you have to follow social rules and you cannot express yourself freely. You're constantly inhibiting your impulses and hiding your emotions, which results in you being mentally depleted of willpower. And there's pretty much no way around it, because unless you're willing to live deep in the mountains surrounded by sheep, you will end up ego depleted at some point during your day. Now, your willpower battery recharges during sleep, so it's always easier to make conscious decisions earlier in the day, provided you have a regular sleep schedule. Now, it's also true that there's a significant genetic and biological aspect to self-control. But by understanding how it works, you can leverage it to build better habits. Practice saying no to yourself. If you're aware of the triggers and you know what you should be doing, then the main problem is that you haven't practiced your self-control muscle enough to get there. Most people had to practice it as a child, depending of course, on their environment and the education that they got. But as adults, the kind of only thing they ended up focusing on was their jobs. So they kind of lost the ability to restrict themselves in other areas. Delayed gratification is at the heart of all of this. It's the ability to delay the perceived pleasure from an activity, which is basically saying no to yourself in the moment and telling yourself you'll have it but later. This is extremely powerful because if you can do it on command, you control your decisions, allowing you to delay the gratification that will otherwise break your fitness streak. Just like a muscle that you train in the gym, you must teach your brain how to do it by practicing saying no when a trigger sparks a desire. When it's conscious, it can almost be turned into a game. You start at level 1 and you choose easy choices to say no to. For example, if your main triggers are food related, you'll probably find it easier to say no to using social media or watching a lot of TV to practice before moving on to the nutrition part. The goal is to prime your brain to say no and to practice it in a domain you're relatively comfortable, and then to transfer those skills onto the main triggers. The good news is that it compounds. If you learn to restrain yourself with food, you'll find it easier to exert self-control in your relationships or work. As your self-control gets stronger, it takes less energy for your brain to say no to impulses. The problem is that the opposite is also true. If you haven't said no to your desires for a long time, it will take everything of you to not engage in impulses or act on desires because your brain is so used to saying yes to every desire that pops into your mind. So you need to start exerting self-control if you want to achieve your fitness goals. Remember that when you have a strong self-control muscle, because you know how to use your willpower, you become unstoppable. You can reach your goal much faster and with less pain because you know how to say no when your goals need you to say it. And if you want a full structure and curriculum to help you with that, you can always join the next cohort. Link in the description. And as always, I hope this helps. Trust the process.